wrench clattered from Jake Morrison's blistered hands, hitting the basement floor with a dull thud just as fire erupted like a furious beast. Through the mansion above, orange flames danced violently along the mahogany paneling of the Whitmore estate, devouring it with ravenous hunger. Somewhere deep within the walls, water dripped slow, mocking a cruel contrast to the inferno raging through the once pristine halls. Through thickening smoke, a scream pierced the air from the second floor, a voice sharp, authoritative still, carried the same cold certainty that had once dismissed him without a second glance. Jake squinted up through the haze, his soot-smeared face turned toward the office window above, where frantic shadows darted behind the glass. Eleanor Whitmore, her eyes, wide with disbelief, met his through the smoke-streaked pane. Her voice might have screamed in terror, but her expression whispered something else entirely recognition, and perhaps something bordering on regret. 6 months ago, Jake had stood at this very estate, not in a boiler room with grime under his nails, but in his only decent suit, clutching a resume worn soft at the corners from overhandling. His steps had echoed off marble floors that gleamed like frozen water, past towering portraits of ancestors whose names were etched in plaques more permanent than most. Legacies. He'd entered Eleanor's corner office with trembling hands and a heart full of quiet hope. The interview had lasted exactly 12 minutes. Mr. Morrison, she had said coolly, eyes fixed on her monitor, fingers flying across the keyboard. In a rhythm of rejection, our company requires a certain caliber. Each syllable was delivered with precise detachment, like a surgeon cutting away what didn't belong. Your background in manual labor, while commendable in its own way, doesn't align with our standards. Jake had sat frozen, swallowing the sting of her words. He'd wanted to tell her about the online business courses he'd taken while his daughter slept beside him, about the certifications earned after 12-hour shifts and aching muscles. But her tone chillingly polite had left no room for human stories. "Thank you for your time," he had said, standing on unsteady legs, a soft crack running through the porcelain of his dignity. She had finally glanced up, flashing a perfunctory smile that never reached her eyes. "We'll be in touch." They both knew the call would never come. Now, 6 months later, fate had dragged Jake back to the Whitmore estate, not in pursuit of a paycheck, but answering an emergency plumbing call on a rainy Tuesday evening. He'd just tucked his daughter Emma into bed, helping her wrestle with fractions and bedtime fears, when the dispatcher's urgent voice buzzed through the radio water damage in the mansion's basement. A risk to the electrical system, immediate. Action required. He kissed Emma's forehead, promised to be back before morning, and drove through sheets of rain to the gates he'd once hoped never to see again. The mansion's bowels were a web of aged copper pipes and neglected fittings, groaning beneath time's weight. Jake worked methodically, tracing the source of the leak until the lights above flickered, sputtered, and died. A sharp crack echoed, followed by the unmistakable hiss of fire igniting on contact. In an instant, the house became a furnace. Years of dormant instincts surged awake. Stay low, find the exit, keep breathing. But as he reached the main floor, the scream halted him mid-step. It came from above, shrill, panicked, unmistakably
We have to
Eleanor.
go now.
He stood there, chest heaving,
Can't leave them.
the grand staircase looming before him like a question carved in flame. Logic screamed, "Get out." The fire was growing fast. The structure was old. His limp souvenir of a firefighter's career ended by falling debris throbbed in protest. And yet, she didn't deserve this. She'd made that clear herself, but his mind wasn't filled with her voice. It was Sarah's, his late wife, reminding him of the man he used to be. It was Emma's, asking why he looked so sad after that interview. It was the echo of a vow he'd once taken, to run toward the fire when others ran away. He took the stairs two at a time, lungs burning. The hallway above was a hellish tunnel, smoke swirling like angry ghosts. He followed Eleanor's voice, coughing through the blackness, past portraits whose painted eyes seemed to judge his every step. He found the door warped, jammed by heat. "Eleanor," he shouted. "It's Jake Morrison. I'm getting you out for a beat." Silence. Then her voice, softer, uncertain. "Jake." maintenance man, stand back. He ordered 3 brutal attempts. Pain shot through his old injury with each blow. Finally, the door splintered. She stood pressed against the far wall, a shadow of the composed woman he remembered. Her designer suit was torn and stained with soot, her meticulously styled hair hanging in damp strands. But it was her eyes wide, terrified, and shimmering with something like realization that held him. The window, she gasped. I tried it stuck. Jake crossed to it in 3 strides. The frame was swollen with age and heat, but his hands steady and practice found the pressure points. A sharp strike, the glass cracked. He cleared it with his jacket. It's a 15-foot drop, he told her, voice calm despite the fire closing in. But the hedge below will cushion the fall. She nodded, then hesitated. As he helped her onto the windowsill, her fingers tightened around his wrist. Why, she asked. Her voice cracked enamored. After what I said to you, why would you do this? Jake met her gaze, past the scorched makeup and smoke, into the depths of a woman forced to reckon with her own humanity. He didn't need to explain. Still, he said the only thing that mattered, because it's the right thing to do, and then he pushed her gently from the window. She landed hard but safe. Jake turned to follow, but behind him, the ceiling groaned. Warning delayed. Flames rained down, chasing sparks across Eleanor's office like vengeful memories. His path back narrowed by the second. He paused at the window, one leg over the sill, and glanced around the room that had once seen his quiet, hope shattered by cold ambition. Her diplomas, framed in gold, still hung above the desk. The very keyboard she'd typed his rejection on glinted faintly in the firelight. And yet, Jake Morrison had come back here a different man. He wasn't seeking validation anymore. He'd already found what truly mattered in Emma's sleepy smile, in Sarah's memory, in the quiet courage that pulled him into the fire rather than away from it. He leapt from the burning room, not to escape, but to carry forward the man he'd rediscovered inside a and for the first time in a long while, he felt whole. The fire no longer roared behind them. It thundered, indifferent and unrelenting, devouring the structure that had once symbolized power, prestige, and permanence. It didn't care for titles or degrees or legacies carved into gold-plated nameplates. The flames knew no hierarchy. Jake hit the ground hard. Eleanor's fall had been cleaner, guided by panic and adrenaline, but Jake's old injury gave way. The moment his boots met the earth, his leg collapsed beneath him, and he tumbled awkwardly into the hedge below. Branches clawed at his jacket, thorns bit into his palms, but he was alive. Breathless, bruised, but alive. He pulled himself upright, wincing as he brushed leaves and twigs from his work-stained clothes. Nearby, Eleanor stood with arms wrapped around herself, her silhouette glowing orange beneath the furious blaze of her childhood home, now unraveling in fire and ash. Her face, once so composed, was pale, almost haunted, her eyes fixed on the mansion as if watching her entire past disintegrate behind those glass panes. Every memory curled and crumbled in the flickering heat. Her shoulders shook not from cold, Jake sensed, but from something older, something more internal, a grief she hadn't prepared for. He opened his mouth, unsure what to say. There were no words for this, no comfort that would sound sincere between the people who had, until this night, belonged to entirely different worlds. So instead, he silently pulled out his phone and dialed the fire department. His fingers unexpectedly steady. Eleanor said nothing as he spoke to the dispatcher, relaying the address, the electrical failure, the explosion of flame. She stood close, her silence not distant, but heavy, almost companionable in its vulnerability. They waited together, two silhouettes against the blaze. When the scream of sirens finally cut through the night, Jake felt something release in his chest. Fire trucks rolled into place with crisp choreography, each hose and ladder unfurled like clockwork. He watched with a strange ache, memories stirring of his own years among them before injury and circumstance had forced him out of the brotherhood that wants to find him. He gave a detailed account to the fire chief. He described the leak, the blackout, the explosion, the way the fire spread like a hungry whisper through brittle, ancient wood. Meanwhile, paramedics hovered over Eleanor, wrapping gauze around her scraped palm, checking her vitals, easing an oxygen mask over her face. When the chaos dulled into order and the mansion was deemed unsalvageable, Jake found himself alone by his van. He wasn't sure whether he should stay or leave. The job was unfinished, but it felt foolish to worry about plumbing now. He was loading his tools when he heard footsteps behind him. Jake. The voice was softer now, hesitant, stripped of command. He turned to see Eleanor, her expression a mixture of apology and disbelief for the first time. She looked unsure of herself. "I wanted to thank you," she said, struggling over the words, like they were foreign to her. "What you did tonight. I don't know how to say it." Jake paused, wrench in hand, the weight of months of rejection rising in his throat. He could have accepted the thanks, nodded, let her walk away, but he didn't. 6 months ago, he said slowly, "You told me I wasn't the caliber of person your company needed." His eyes held hers, steady, unflinching. "Tonight, when everything was on the line, what caliber did I turn out to be?" The words lingered between them like the last smoke curling from the wreckage. Eleanor's composure cracked, just slightly. Her lips parted, then closed again. The usual script she lived by had no place here. No spreadsheet or policy could answer a question like that. A paramedic approached her with paperwork, breaking the moment. She turned away, clipboard in hand, her silence louder than anything she could have said. Jake finished loading his Vandot, and though her answer never came, he didn't need to hear it anymore. He'd already seen it in her eyes, in her hesitation, in her broken voice when she called him by name. Some truths didn't need to be spoken aloud to be understood, but just as he climbed into the driver's seat, she reappeared at his window. Her hand rested on the glass, still smudged with soot. Her once impeccable suit now looked like the battle gear of someone who had survived something far more than fire. He rolled the window down. Eleanor leaned in, her voice low and raw. "You're the caliber of person I should have recognized 6 months ago." Jake met her gaze, and something in him finally softened. He nodded once, and then he drove away, the blaze shrinking behind him in the rearview mirror like a vanishing past he no longer needed to chase. The streets of Millbrook were quiet as dawn approached, painted in the silvery stillness of a world not yet awake. Jake pulled into his apartment's lot, shoulders heavy, but heart strangely unburdened inside. The silence felt sacred. Emma's math homework still sat on the kitchen table, pages open like she'd waited for him just a little longer. Jake walked to her bedroom door and stood there, watching her sleep in the soft spill of hallway light. Her chest rose and fell in tiny, steady breaths, her hand curled around her stuffed dog. She hadn't asked about the interview in weeks,
can't leave them.
as if she'd decided, at age 7, to stop expecting good news. That realization broke something in him. No child should ever have to protect their parent from disappointment. He leaned against the door frame, eyes wet, and promised himself that she would never have to again. The next morning, just as he was scrambling eggs for her breakfast, his phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. He wiped his hands and picked it up. "Jake," came the voice, quieter now, warmer. "I hope I'm not calling too early. I got your number from the dispatch records. I wanted to follow up, and there's something I think you deserve to know." It was Eleanor at first. She talked about the insurance, investigators, statements, documentation for the cause of the fire, but beneath the practical tone, Jake heard of that tremor of something more human, regret, maybe, or remorse, wrapped in curiosity. "I've been thinking about what you said," she continued, "about recognition, about caliber. And I realize I owe you more than just a thank you. I owe you context." They agreed to meet that afternoon at a little diner downtown, a place with cracked leather booths and coffee that came strong and bottomless. Neutral ground. Jake arrived first and chose the booth in the back, where the morning sun didn't feel so harsh. When Eleanor entered 20 minutes later, he almost didn't recognize her. Gone was the power suit and calculated stride. She wore jeans, a simple sweater, and her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked younger, lighter. Human dot. She slid into the booth, declined coffee, accepted water with a hand that trembled slightly. The silence stretched. My adoptive father, she finally said, barely above a whisper, was Captain Robert Sterling. He died 10 years ago in a warehouse fire, trying to save a family on the 4th floor. Jake's heart skipped. He knew that name. Everyone in the department knew Sterling, a legend. Jake had served under him for 2 years, followed his lead into countless blazes. He was the kind of leader who led with courage, never commands. A man who inspired loyalty with quiet strength. He used to talk about his team all the time. Eleanor went on. There was one firefighter he talked about more than anyone. Someone who had this gift, this instinct for fire. He once told me that if he had to trust someone with his life, it would be that man. Jake didn't move. He said your name. Jake lowered his coffee cup, his hands suddenly unsteady. Elm Street. Mrs. Rodriguez, carrying her down those stairs, flames licking. The walls, her husband screaming from the sidewalk. The baby born 2 weeks later, named after Sarah. He remembered every second. Robert called you the best firefighter he ever worked with, Eleanor said, finally meeting his gaze. He said you didn't just save people, you saw solutions when others saw chaos. Emotion clogged his throat. The weight of that acknowledgement so long denied, now delivered by the daughter of the man who had once believed in him, settled deep inside him. I never made the connection, she whispered. When you came into my office, I saw what I expected to see. I never thought to ask who you were or what you'd done. I failed, not just as a professional, but as Robert's daughter. Jake stared at her, heart cracked wide open. For the first time, she wasn't a CEO. She wasn't the gatekeeper of opportunity or a symbol of dismissal. She was just a woman trying to make something right. And maybe, just maybe, that was the beginning of something neither of them had expected. Healing. Recognition. And the start of a second chance. He had expected confrontation, resentment, maybe even a bitter catharsis. But as he sat across from Eleanor Sterling, watching the tremble in her fingers and the way her shoulders bore the weight of unseen burdens, all that righteous anger withered into something quieter, sadder. Her remorse wasn't performative, it was embedded in her posture, woven into the very fabric of her expression. This wasn't the steely corporate executive who had dismissed him months ago. This was a woman unraveling in the presence of a truth she could no longer outrun. He hadn't mentioned a daughter, Jake said softly, as though the memory itself were made of glass, not adopted, not biological. A slow, sorrowful smile spread across Eleanor's face, melancholy and tender all at once, shifting her whole demeanor. It made her look human in a way that tailored suits never had. Robert was a private man, she murmured. He thought leadership meant separating who he was from the role he played. He wanted to be seen as a captain first, everything else second. She paused. He adopted me when I was 16, after my parents died in a car crash. The confession floated between them, fragile and raw. He was my father's partner on the police force before he switched to firefighting. When I lost them both, he became everything, my compass, my shelter. He pushed me to be strong, to survive. And suddenly, the puzzle began to solve itself. Jake saw at the root of Eleanor's rigidity, the armor of her ambition, the way she carried herself with precision, always composed, always the steps ahead. She learned early that the world was capable of ripping everything away in a heartbeat. So she had built herself into something unshakable, convinced that safety could be engineered, that vulnerability was just a liability waiting to be exploited. I wanted to be like him, she continued, but I couldn't, not after watching my parents disappear without warning. I was terrified of danger, so I chose the safest path I could find. Business school, forecasts, controlled risks, a world where I could keep the chaos out. Jake nodded, not out of obligation, but with genuine understanding. There's nothing wrong with choosing safety, he said gently. Your father would have understood that. Eleanor's eyes flickered, as if she wanted to believe him, but the guilt had already carved itself deep into her soul. The night he died, she whispered, "He told me he was thinking of retiring. He wanted to spend more time with me, with people who mattered. He was proud of the team, proud of the life he built, but he was ready to let go." She looked up at Jake then, voice catching on the edge of the next revelation. "He was planning to recommend you for lieutenant." The words landed like a blow. Jake inhaled sharply. That single promotion would have altered the course of his life. Better pay, more stability, a chance to give Emma the security she deserved. But instead, Captain Sterling's death had coincided with the accident that ended Jake's career, and everything unraveled from there. "I'm sorry," Eleanor said so softly it barely reached him. But the weight of it was profound. It wasn't just about the missed promotion or the interview she mishandled. It was everything. The lost time, the unseen worth, the quiet sacrifices. "I'm sorry you lost your mentor, your purpose, the chance to build a future you earned. And when you came to me for help, instead of honoring what Robert saw in you, I failed you again." Jake's hand moved instinctively across the table. He covered hers gently, rough calluses meeting soft, untouched skin. Her fingers, though trembling, gripped back with unexpected strength. "We can't rewrite the past," Jake said, voice steady with grace. "But maybe we can write something better going forward." Eleanor looked up, her eyes searching his. In them, he saw the echoes of grief, but also a flicker of hope, tentative and new. "What did you have in mind?" she asked, instead of answering. She reached into her purse and withdrew a thick manila envelope. She placed it on the table between them, her hands shaking as she let go. "Robert left this for you. It was part of his will. I only found it yesterday while going through his old papers. I saw your name again, and I finally understood." She paused, breath shallow, emotion threatening to fracture her composure. "I should have given this to you years ago, but I didn't know where to find you." And when you walked into my office that day, Jake stared at the envelope. His name, his full name, was written across the front in Captain Sterling's unmistakable blocky handwriting. The sight of it brought a wave of memories crashing through him. The duty rosters, the notes of praise, the first time Robert had clapped a hand on his shoulder and called him one of the good ones. "I haven't read it," Eleanor said. "It's not mine to read."
We have to go now.
She pulled out a second envelope, smaller, addressed to her. "He wrote to me, too. Told me to find you if anything ever happened to him. I failed him, Jake. I failed both of you." Jake's hands trembled as he opened the larger envelope. Inside was a single page, aged, but clean dated just 2 weeks before Sterling's death. Alongside it were a stack of documents bearing official stamps and signatures. Jake. The letter began, "If Eleanor is reading this to you, then I'm gone, and you're probably wondering why I left you these. The truth is, you're the best damn firefighter I've ever had the honor to serve with. But beyond that, you're a good man. Sarah always said you deserved more than the dangers we braved every day, especially with Emma depending on you." Jake choked at the mention of his late wife. Sarah, gone too soon. Robert had stood at her funeral, silent in the back row, his presence a rare comfort in that sea of grief. "I've submitted your file for early pension approval based on your injury, an exemplary service report. The paperwork's enclosed. It won't make you rich, but it'll give you options, a softer landing. Maybe take some courses, start that contracting business you always talked about. There's also a letter of recommendation for the instructor position at the academy next year. You've got too much knowledge to waste sitting on the sidelines." Jake's breath hitched as he sorted through the documents: pension approvals, scholarships, letters of recommendation, all dated 10 years ago, all processed, all never delivered. Then Eleanor reached into her purse once more, revealing a small velvet box. She held it like something sacred. "He left this for Emma." Inside was a delicate gold locket, engraved with the fire department's emblem, and the initials EMA. Folded note beneath it read, "For Emma Morrison, daughter of a hero. May she always know how proud her father's captain was of the man who raised her." Jake closed his eyes. and the emotion he'd buried for years surged through him like a tide that long held back. 10 years of scraping by, of saying no to dance classes, of watching Emma paint with broken brushes because he couldn't afford better, all because the future Robert had tried to secure for him had disappeared into silence. Why didn't any of this reach me? He whispered. Eleanor's face darkened. She placed a final document on the table, marked with the fire department's administrative letterhead. There was a clerical error, she said, her voice low. Your file was misfiled under your middle name. These papers sat in a cabinet for years, waiting. No one thought to check. But there was more in her eyes, something she hadn't yet confessed. Jake waited, quiet but unrelenting. Eleanor inhaled shakily. My company handles the fire department's benefits administration for the past 8 years. When I took over as CEO 3 years ago, I was supposed to audit the legacy files. I saw the unclaimed benefits, and I let them sit. She looked away, ashamed. I wanted clean numbers, stronger reports. The unclaimed files made our metrics look better. The words landed like a gut punch. The woman he'd saved from the fire, the one who now sat trembling before him, had unknowingly played a role in a decade of his struggle, in the hardship that had shaped Emma's childhood, in the erosion of his pride. For a long time, Jake said nothing. The silence wasn't cold, it was the silence of comprehension, of mourning what might have been. But when he finally looked up, there was no hatred in his eyes, just a deep, aching sorrow. I lost years I'll never get back, he said quietly. Not just money, but time with my daughter, with myself. I know, Eleanor whispered, and I'll never be able to give them back. She placed a final envelope on the table, blank, but full of possibility. But maybe I can help you rebuild the next 10. And somehow, that was enough, not to erase what had been lost, but to finally begin the work of healing, of honoring the man Robert Sterling had believed in, of giving Jake Morrison the second chance he'd more than earned. The price of fire, the grace of forgiveness. I understand if you hate me, Eleanor whispered, her voice barely carrying above the quiet hum of the diner. I understand if you can never forgive what I've done, both by choice and through negligence. But I want to make it right, Jake. However I can. I need to make it right. Jake Morrison looked across the table at the woman who had once been the architect of his ruin. Now stripped of power, pride, and pretense, gone was the impenetrable armor of the executive. In its place sat a woman exposed, uncertain, and perhaps for the first time honest. Her voice trembled not with fear, but with the weight of her own reckoning. He studied her, this person who had been both the destroyer of his livelihood and, unknowingly, the spark of his redemption. Her eyes were soft, no longer cold with protocol, but glistening with unspoken sorrow. Jake spoke quietly, every word measured. The pension. Can it be reinstated? She nodded quickly, almost eagerly. Yes, with back payments, 10 years' worth, plus interest. The paperwork's already in motion. It was always legally yours. And the instructor job, our current instructor is retiring next month. If you want it, it's yours. The pay is strong. The benefits are excellent. And you'll be training the next generation of firefighters. She hesitated, then added with quiet reverence, Robert always said you had a gift for teaching. At the mention of Captain Sterling, mentor, father figure, moral compass, something shifted inside Jake. A weight he had carried silently for years began to loosen. He imagined the possibilities. The pension would erase the crushing debt he'd been drowning under, create a future for Emma, his daughter, his everything. A new neighborhood, a safe school, college. The job would bring meaning back into his life. More than a paycheck, it would be a purpose, a legacy, a way to honor Robert Sterling's memory while shaping others who would run into fires. Not a way, but another part of him, the one that remembered sitting across from Eleanor in her pristine office, her eyes scanning him like a resume already discarded, still burned with the raw ache of humiliation. He didn't want vengeance. He wanted understanding, real, transformative understanding. There's something else I need, he said, his voice firm. Eleanor leaned forward, as if sensing something important was coming. Anything. Name it. I need you to understand what it's like, Jake said, every syllable like a match struck in the dark. To be judged by where you come from, by the clothes you wear, the address on your resume, to have doors slammed in your face by people who never look twice to see who you really are. He paused, letting the silence carry the weight of his truth. I need your promise that no one else walks into your office and leaves feeling like I did. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears, and for the first time, Jake saw something break open inside her. Not the polished sorrow of someone managing damage control, but a soul catching fire with remorse. I promise, she whispered. I swear. To you, Jake, I'll change how we hire, how we evaluate, how we see people. No more assumptions. No more prejudice. Robert would be ashamed of who I became, but maybe I could still become the woman he hoped I'd be. And Jake nodded because he believed her, because something in her words, in her eyes, in the quiet conviction behind her trembling voice, told him this wasn't about guilt. It was about becoming. They sat for a while longer, the people suspended in that strange, silent space where forgiveness begins to take root. Then, out of nowhere, Jake surprised even himself. Emma's dance recital is next Friday, he said. 7 o'clock, at the elementary school. She's been practicing for months. She's really good. He hesitated. Would you like to come? The question floated there, full of risk and grace. Eleanor's face lit with something pure, something like joy. You'd want me there. After everything, Jake smiled softly. Captain Sterling always said people deserve second chances, and Emma could use another person in the crowd cheering her on. Fair warning, though she'll probably talk her ear off about sequins and pirouettes, and Eleanor laughed a sound warmer, freer than any Jake had heard from her before. Not polished or professional, but real. I'd love to come, she said. I haven't been to a children's recital in, well, ever. Thank you. As they got up to leave, Eleanor paused by the door, her voice low with unease. Jake,
we have to
there's
go
something
now.
else about the fire.
Jake
turned at her, instantly alert. He could tell this wasn't a detail. This was a reckoning. The electrical fault that caused the fire, it wasn't just bad luck, she said. The investigators found signs of substandard wiring, materials that should have been replaced years ago. The contractor cut corners, and my insurance company, they've been hiding similar cases for months. Settling quietly, avoiding exposure, Jake's face went still. How many people are at risk? Dozens, maybe hundreds. That same contractor worked on multiple properties. My board wants to cover it up. They're planning to pay off the loudest complaints and pray the rest stay quiet. Jake understood immediately this wasn't just about fire or fraud. This was a test, not of loyalty, but of conscience. She wasn't asking him for advice. She was asking for courage. What are you going to do? Eleanor stood taller than shoulders back, eyes clear, and for the first time, Jake saw her not as the woman who had once dismissed him, but as the one Robert must have believed she could become. I'm going to push for full disclosure, mandatory inspections, even if it costs me my job, even if it bankrupts the company. Jake smiled genuinely, full of for the first time in years. It's what we're going to do, he said. 1 week later, Jake stood in the wings of Millbrook Elementary's small auditorium, helping Emma adjust the tiny tiara atop her curls. Her cheeks glowed with excitement, and her eyes sparkled with nervous joy. The auditorium buzzed with proud parents, restless siblings, and the scent of carnations. In the third row, Eleanor sat next to Mrs. Patterson, Jake's elderly neighbor, chatting quietly about the sequin tutu Emma wore like a crown. Eleanor had arrived early, bearing flowers and a handwritten card, nervously asking if there was a proper recital protocol. She wore a simple blue dress, no blazer, no heels, just softness. Her hair flowed loose, and in the soft stage lights, she looked 10 years younger, lighter, truer. She's beautiful, Eleanor had whispered as Emma stepped into the spotlight, every movement infused with joy and devotion. She dances like her mother did. Jake blinked, surprised. You knew Sarah. Eleanor's voice was gentle. I saw the wedding announcement. Robert showed it to me. He said his best firefighter was marrying the prettiest nurse in the county. He was so proud of you both, and as Emma twirled across the small stage, catching the light with every spin, something inside Jake mended. Not just the financial wounds or the professional scars, but the deeper, quieter ache of not being seen. The pension was being processed. The instructor job began in 2 weeks, and Eleanor's company had just launched the largest safety recall in insurance industry history. But more than that, Jake knew that Emma would grow up believing in the possibility of redemption after the performance. Emma ran to them with a bouquet in one arm and boundless energy in the other. She hugged her father first, then turned to Eleanor with open, curious eyes. "Are you Daddy's new friend?" she asked in that disarming, guileless way that only a child could. Eleanor looked at Jake for permission, then knelt. "I hope so," she said simply. "If your daddy thinks I'm worthy of being his friend." Jake looked at them, his daughter, the bright hope of everything he loved, and this woman who had once failed him, now striving every day to become someone better. "I think," Jake said, lifting Emma into his arms, "that we're all worthy of friendship." And Eleanor nodded, understanding what she was being given more than forgiveness, a legacy to live up to. That night, as they walked through the quiet October streets of Millbrook, Jake, with Emma asleep against his shoulder, Eleanor beside him with arms full of flowers and recital programs, they didn't look back. There was no need to. They were no longer running from the past, but walking steadily into a future forged by truth, courage, and the grace of second chances. In time, Jake would become one of the most beloved instructors at the Fire Academy, teaching more than safety protocols, teaching empathy, resilience, and the courage to look deeper. Eleanor would rebuild her company on the ashes of its former arrogance, grounded its practices in honesty and compassion, always asking herself, what would Robert Sterling have done? But that night, with the stars overhead and the weight of old wounds lifting, Jake Morrison knew something simple and true. Sometimes the most heroic rescues don't happen in burning buildings. They happen in quiet conversations, in vulnerable truths, in the soft, human moments where people save one another from the loneliness of being unseen. At the foot of his apartment building, Eleanor paused. "Thank you," she said, her voice no longer fragile, "for giving me a second chance, for showing me not who I was but who I can still become. Robert would be proud of you." Jake adjusted Emma in his arms, her little breath warm against his neck. He looked at Eleanor, really looked at her. "He already is," he replied, and in Eleanor's quiet smile, full of gratitude and grace, Jake saw the kindling of something new. Not a beginning, but a becoming.